Daughter of Invention by Julia Alvarez. She wanted to invent something, my mother. There was a period after we arrived in this country until 5 or so years later, when my mother was inventing. They were never pressing global needs she was addressing with her pencil and pad. She would have said that was for men to do, rockets and engines that ran on gasoline and turned the wheels of the world. She was just fussing with little house things. Don't mind her. She always invented at night after settling her house down. On his side of the bed, my father would be conked out for an hour already, his Spanish newspaper draped over his chest, his glasses propped up on his bedside table, looking out eerily at the darkened room like a disembodied guard. But in her lighted corner, like some devoted scholar burning the midnight oil, my mother was inventing, sheets pulled to her lap, pillows propped up behind her reading glasses riding the bridge of her nose like a schoolmarm's. On her lap lay one of those innumerable pads of paper my father always brought home from his office, compliments of some pharmaceutical company advertising tranquilizers or antibiotics or skin cream. In her other hand, my mother held a pencil that looked like a pen with a little cylinder of lead inside. She would work on a sketch of something familiar, but drawn at such close range, so she could attach a special nozzle or handier handle. The thing looked peculiar. Once I mistook the spile of a corkscrew for a nautilus shell, but it could just as well have been a galaxy forming. It was the only time all day we'd catch her sitting down, for she herself was living proof of the perpetual mobile machine so many inventors had sought over the ages. My sisters and I would seek her out now when she seemed to have a moment to talk to us. We were having trouble at school, or we wanted her to persuade my father to give us permission to go into the city, or to a shopping mall, or a movie in broad daylight. My mother would wave us out of the room. The problem with you girls, I can tell you right now what the problem always boiled down to. We wanted to become Americans. My father and my mother at first would have none of it. You girls are driving me crazy, she always threatened. If we kept nagging, when I end up in Bellevue, you'll be safely sorry. She spoke in English when she argued with us, even though in a matter of months her daughters were the fluent ones. Her English was much better than my father's, but it was still a mishmash of mixed-up idioms and sayings that showed she was green behind the ears, as she called it. If my sisters and I tried to get her to talk in Spanish, she'd snap, "When in Rome, do unto the Romans." I had become the spokesman for my sister, and I would stand my ground in that bedroom. "We're not going to that school any more, Mommy." "You have to." Her eyes would widen with worry. "In this country it is against the law not to go to school. You want us to get thrown out? You want us to get killed? Those kids were throwing stones today." "Sticks and stones don't break bones," she chanted. I could tell, though, by the look on her face, it was as if one of those stones the kids had aimed at us had hit her. But she always pretended we were at fault. "What did you do to provoke them? It takes two to tangle, you know." Thanks a lot, Mom." I'd storm out of that room and into mine. I never called her Mom, except when I wanted her to feel how much she had failed us in this country. She was a good enough mommy, fussing and scolding and giving advice, but a terrible girlfriend-parent, a real failure of a mom. Back she'd go to her pencil and pad, scribbling and tisking and tearing off paper, finally giving up, and taking up her New York Times. Some nights, though, she'd get a good idea, and she'd rush into my room, a flushed look on her face, her tablet of paper in her hand, a cursory knock on the door as she'd just thrown open. "Do I have something to show you, Cuquita?" This was my time to myself, after I'd finished my homework, while my sisters were still downstairs watching TV in the basement. Hunched over my small desk, the overhead lamp turned off, my lamp shining poignantly on my paper, the rest of the room in warm, soft, uncreated darkness, I wrote my secret poems in my new language. "You're going to ruin your eyes," my mother would storm into my room, turning on the overly bright overhead light, scaring off whatever shy passion I had just begun coaxing out of a labyrinth of feelings with the blue thread of my writing. "Oh, Mommy," I'd cry out, my eyes blinking up at her, "I'm writing." Cuquita, that was her communal pet name for whoever was in her favor. "Cuquita, when I make $1 million, I'll buy you your very own typewriter." I'd been nagging my mother for just one, just like the one my father had bought her to do his older forms at home. "Gravy on the turkey" is what she called it when someone was buttering her up. She'd butter and pour, "I'll hire you your very own typist." Down she'd plop on my bed and hold out her pad to me. "Take a guess, Cuquita. I'd study her rough sketch a moment. Soap sprayed from the nozzle head of a shower when you turn the knob a certain way. Coffee with creamer already mixed in. Time-released water capsules for your plants when you were away. A keychain with a timer that would go off when your parking meter was about to expire. The ticking would help you find your keys easily if you mislaid them. The famous one, famous only in hindsight, was the stick person dragging a square by a rope. A suitcase with wheels? Oh, of course we'd humor her. What every household needs, a shower like a car wash, keys ticking like a bomb, luggage on a leash. By now, as you can see, it had become something of a family joke. Our Thomas Edison mommy, our Benjamin Franklin mom. Her face would fall. Come on now, use your head. One more wrong guess and she'd tell me, pressing with her pencil point the different highlights of this incredible new wonder. Remember that time we took the car to Bear Mountain and we realized that we'd forgotten to pack an opener with our picnic? We kept correcting her, but she insisted this is how it should be said. When we were ready to eat, we didn't have any way to open the refreshments cans. This before flip-top lids, which she claimed had crossed her mind. You know what this is now? A shake of my head. It's a car bumper, but see, this part is a removable can opener. So simple, and yet so necessary, no? Yeah, Mommy, you should patent it, I'd shrug. She'd tear off the scratch paper and fold it, carefully, corner to corner, as if she were going to save it. But then she'd toss it in the wastebasket on her way out of the room, and give a little laugh like a disclaimer. It's half of one or 2 dozen of another. I suppose none of her daughters were very encouraging. We resented her spending time on those dumb inventions. Here we were trying to fit in America among Americans. We needed help figuring out who we were, why the Irish kids whose grandparents were mixed 2 generations ago, why they were calling us spics. Why had we come to this country in the first place? Important, crucial, final things, you see. And here was our own mother, who didn't have a second to help us puzzle any of this out, inventing gadgets to make life easier for American moms. Why, it seemed as if she was arming our own enemy against us. One time, she did have a moment of triumph. Every night, she liked to read the New York Times in bed before turning off her light to see what the Americans were up to. One night, she let out a yelp to wake up my father beside her, bolt upright, reaching for his glasses, which, in his haste, he knocked across the room. Que pasa, what is wrong? There was terror in her voice, fear she'd seen in his eyes in the Dominican Republic before we left. We were being watched there. He was being followed. He and Mother had often exchanged those looks. They could not talk, of course, though they must have whispered to each other in fear at night in the dark bed. Now in America, he was safe, a success even. His Centro Medico in Brooklyn was thronged with the sick and the homesick. But in dreams, he went back to those awful days and long nights, and my mother's screams confirmed his secret fear. We had not gotten away after all. They had come for us at last. Papi, I'm sorry. Go back to sleep, Cuquito. It's nothing really. My mother held up the Times for him to squint at the small print. Back page headline. One hand tapping all over the top of the bedside table for his glasses, the other rubbing his eyes to wakefulness. Remember how I showed you that suitcase with little wheels so we would not have to carry those heavy bags when we traveled? Someone stole my idea and made $1 million. She shook the paper in his face. She shook the paper in all our faces that night. See, this man was no bobo. He didn't put all his pokers on a back burner. I kept telling you, one of these days my ship would pass me by in the night. She wagged her finger at my sisters and my father and me, laughing all the while, one of those eerie laughs crazy people in movies laugh. We had congregated in her room to hear the good news she'd been yelling down the stairs, and now we eyed her and each other. I suppose we were all thinking the same thing. Wouldn't it be weird and sad if Mommy did end up in Bellevue, as she'd always threatened she might? Yeah, enough. She waved us out of the room at last. There's no use trying to drink spilt milk, that's for sure. It was the suitcase rollers that stopped my mother's hand. She had weather-vaned a minor brainstorm. She would have to start taking herself seriously. That blocked the free play of her ingenuity. Besides, she had also begun working at my father's office, and at night she was too tired and busy filling in columns with how much money they had made that day to be fooling with gadgets.